Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you are here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll be reading the conclusion and epilogue to Nathan Hare's The Black Anglo-Saxons, starting on page 129. He had some specific ideas about this group of people, and we're going to listen to his conclusions about them.
Greetings. My name is the Revolutionary Matron, and my show is called The Learning Curve. I broadcast on a network called KWAZ Radio. There are other hosts on the network I'd like you to meet.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed here belong solely to the respondent, and they do not necessarily reflect any broadcast networks, affiliates, nor sponsors. The Learning Curve is a broadcast created for the benefit of my global community. Black is a consciousness. Content is being used for our commentary, research, criticism, education, scholarship, teaching, preaching, and news reporting. No copyright infringement is intended. I will make enunciation mistakes. I will give you my opinion about the information. And if you ever ask, I will send you my source.
Greetings, Sister Raw and the elders listening with her. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. The late sociologist Louis Wirth said there were four basic approaches which characterized the reaction of minority groups to discrimination and rejection. Those four basic approaches are assimilationist, separatist, pluralist, and militant. Greetings, forecast. Thanks for tuning in. The efforts of the assimilationists have not been wasted on Negro youth. In a 1962 survey I conducted of 100 Negro college juniors and seniors, one of the questions was, discuss the Negro's situation as you imagine it will be by 1982. Just 20 years. I was amazed to note how many thought the Negro will then be indistinguishable owing to the process of miscegenation. This, of course, is assimilationism at its purest. In practice, the wishful thinking of the Black Anglo-Saxon is less racially assimilationist than socially accommodationist. The fundamental dilemma of the Black Anglo-Saxon is that while rejecting the despicable thing called Negro, he must at the same time accept the place designated for his kind. He is pressured in many subtle ways to be as much like whites as possible, to integrate with them. If possible, generally it is not, and accept their society, mores, and whims. The Black Anglo-Saxon custom of accommodation has been three main effects. One, it allows the Negro to surrender his fate to the whim of the white world. Two, it magnifies the sense of white power and white superiority. And three, it minimizes the Negro's own sense of responsibility for doing something about his situation, including the forcing of white hands. The sum total of these is constantly to undermine the Negro's self-respect and self-sufficiency, both individually and collectively, a fact born out of the intensive study of the Negro personality, wherein a Princeton University psychologist named Bertrand P. Karen concludes that some Negroes think of themselves and other Negroes just about worthless. As a consequence of his lack of pride and self-color, the Black Anglo-Saxon tries to be whiter than white and even more super-patriotic than his white counterpart. His conspicuous display of loyalty is well documented by white behavioral scientists. See Gunnar Myrdal, An American Dilemma, and The Mark of Oppression by psychotherapists Adam Gardner and Lionel Ovisi. I have never met Negro graduates of leading universities who argued on behalf of states' rights. I have even met Negro graduates of leading universities who argued on behalf of state rights. One young man was peeved because Negroes were not allowed to join the John Birch Society, which is a right-wing club that's ultra-patriotic and ultra-white. At a recent integrated gathering, a Negro gentleman proclaimed that he didn't believe in all these overnight changes. Sometimes you end up worse off than before. He then declared that we should go back to the customs we followed 200 years ago. He seemed completely stunned when reminded that he himself would have been a slave, then been a slave field hand. In sum, the Black Anglo-Saxon, in an effort to gain admittance to white society, must conform, and then maybe he'll be accepted into white society. It is a high price to pay for an inalienable right. At the opposite extreme of assimilationism is Negro separatism, familiar to many in the form of the Black Muslims. Separatists believe that whites won't integrate. If you want to be separate, they're against you. Want to integrate, they're against you. If you want to get down on your knees and start praying and hollering, say in Birmingham, they sick the dogs on you. Therefore, separatists believe that his only recourse is to separate from the white devils. Separatists believe that separation will automatically bring about equality, while assimilationists believe, which include the Black Anglo-Saxons, that assimilation, by which they erroneously guard as synonymous with integration and public desegregation, is the key to equality. They prefer to liquidate the Negro as a category. The third approach, which has been adopted by certain minority groups, may be termed pluralistic. Jews in many nations, and to some extent in the United States or the French Canadians in Canada, adhere to this pluralistic approach, which demands equality of opportunity and equality of citizenship, including access to all public and civic facilities, at the same time seeking to preserve group identity as a distinct ethnic group. The approaches of the pluralists, assimilationists, and separatists overlap in certain respects. In others, they are contradictory. For example, the limitation of the pluralist approach is similar to the assimilationist approach in that both equate freedom and equality, although their paths are contrary. The pluralist seeks freedom by affirming his group identity. The assimilationist, of which the Black Anglo-Saxon is an arch example, seeks freedom by denying his identity. Remember, I told you assimilation and integration are death. The separatist seeks neither to affirm nor deny his identity within white society. He aspires, as his name implies, to separate himself from that society. Yet, like the pluralist, he stresses the collective and sees his salvation in the cohesion of his group. Unlike the pluralist, however, he categorically rejects white society and wants to create a Negro nation outside the white community. Greetings, Anthony McPhail. Thanks for tuning in. As a general practice, none questions whether the white man in the United States is free himself. In reality, this American white man, although admittedly far better off than his Negro counterpart, is himself far from free. Even the establishment admits that 1/5 of our citizens, white and black, inhabit substandard dwellings and live substandard lives. The true freedom is one that would include full employment, decent education and housing, medical care and security in old age, freedom to develop one's human potential, harness man's mind and energies to find a cure for cancer, mental illness, the common cold, the freedom to grow, create, debate, dissent, the freedom of alienation and prejudice, freedom from nuclear war, freedom to live in peace and social tranquility. It would appear then that someone has to steer whites towards freedom, a broad freedom that would encompass equality for Negroes. For whites as individuals are human and were released from the grip of our vicious system of competitive acquisition and the anachronisms of undying primitive customs, passions, and social hypocrisies. They might shed their irrationalities with regard to the rights of other men. This steering toward freedom entails a far from easy struggle for both the Negro and the white. It has to be, by its nature, a militant struggle. It is here that the Negro is today making his contribution to all society, white and black. Out of his more desperate need, he is giving a more militant leadership, not only to his own group, but to the whites as well. In the next few years, the struggle will intensify, and I believe that many Black Anglo-Saxons, for all I've said about them, will move toward militancy. It is my deepest hope that the criticism I have made may play a role in that change. Those were his conclusions. But then, a few years later, he wrote an epilogue. Black Anglo-Saxons Revisited, the Nouveau Blacks. 5 years have come and gone since the Black Anglo-Saxons was published in 1965. So he's writing in 1970. On the eve of the Black Power movement, which was most emphatically not the twilight of Black Anglo-Saxonism. As a matter of fact, many persons, then Black Anglo-Saxons, in the purest sense, have now, not too surprisingly, emerged as Black nationalists of a sort, or what we shall call the Nouveau Blacks. Understand that E. Franklin Frazier, when he wrote of middle-class Black Anglo-Saxons, or the Black bourgeoisie, was referring to the Negro bourgeoisie. His book was published initially in France under the title Bourgeoisie Noire, and then translated literally to the English Black bourgeoisie. But it was not fashionable in those days. In fact, it was taboo in some circles to use the word Black in reference to Negroes. Today, there is emerging a true Black bourgeoisie. They are children of the Negro bourgeoisie, bad, happy recruits and or rejects from the poverty program, the Urban League, and the NAACP, plus opportunistic ex-Black Anglo-Saxons proper. More about this species later. In the meantime, let us clarify some basic misconceptions about Black Anglo-Saxons of pure stock and look in on what they are doing now. Some readers apparently slid over my statement that Black Anglo-Saxons are more likely to be middle class, but that not all are middle class, and not all of the middle class are Black Anglo-Saxons. They are no doubt influenced in part by Oliver Cox's curious introduction, which time has already proven to be misguided. Cox zealously overplayed the similarities of the Black bourgeoisie and the Black Anglo-Saxons in order to take posthumous potshots at E. Franklin Frazier. Not only has time proven Cox wrong, he has been relegated to such acts of retaliation as outlawing my appearance as a speaker at Lincoln University when members of a student group he was sponsoring sought my services. Reading Cox's introduction, one suspects that he never actually read the Black Anglo-Saxons, but bitter over Frazier's relative acceptance as a scholar, took the opportunity to attack Frazier posthumously through my book by lumping the Black Anglo-Saxons and Isunum's Black nationalism into a so-called Frazier school. It was interesting to note that my book was not footnoted, but Cox footnoted his introduction. The Black Anglo-Saxons was never meant as a sociological treatise to be read mainly by white sociologists, but Black Anglo-Saxons who could not contend with its content joined Cox in attacking its methods. Even an admirer of the book, who has used it as a reference in at least 2 published articles, condemned the fact that it was not footnoted. Actually, I was one of the most proficient footnoters among the PhD candidates at the University of Chicago in the early 1960s. It happens that the original publishers plead haste on Cox's introduction. I never saw it before the book was published, and it obviously does not deserve a serious rebuttal now. Black Anglo-Saxons at Howard University, who are said to have driven Frazier to his death in the days when my book was being written, eagerly joined in this deception. My immediate superior, for example, frowned on me because a Southern white moderate sociologist friend of his had read the Black Anglo-Saxons and concluded in a Social Forces review that the only Black leaders I then seemed to admire were W.E.B. Du Bois and Malcolm X. Others called me in a huff because they recognized themselves and sought to bear down on my public utterances for fear that I knew a good deal more than I had told, which was true. They eventually created a reaction in me in self-defense, which led to a brief Black power struggle on the campus and my eventual dismissal along with 5 other professors and 20 students. However, the protest came in direct response to a Black Anglo-Saxon dignitary plan announcing the Washington Post on September 6 of 1966 to raise Howard's quality by making it 60% white by 1970. So they wanted to raise Howard's quality and make it a white school. When I mocked the proposal of Howard dignitaries, as printed in the Washington Post, they decided to observe my classes. One day toward the end of September, while discussing the impact of urbanization on social norms, I criticized an anachronism of some of our professed codes of sexual conduct, then gave assurances, nonetheless, of my abiding adherence to those norms. To document that fact, I told of my efforts the previous year to launch an association of virgins on the campus. However, one girl grew sick and dropped out, another flunked out, and the other one wouldn't march all by herself. I then explained that the reason Howard's wall clocks always differ as to the time of day, one saying 2:40, another 10:20, still another something else, is that every time a virgin passes a clock at Howard, the clock stands still. Within 30 minutes after the class was over, the chairman of my department was excitedly calling me in to say that the dean had said that a student had said that I had said that I was the only virgin on Howard's campus. I had already run afoul of Howard's Black Anglo-Saxon conventions some 4 years previously while fighting professionally under an assumed name. One night, about a week after Davy Moore, then featherweight champion, was killed in the ring, I was fighting in Washington, D.C.'s old Capitol arena. Unknown to me, at ringside sat the Dean of Men and the Associate Dean of Liberal Arts and his wife. After the fight, they greeted me. I was dressed in an old army jacket and some khaki pants. A few days later, the top dean, who was not viewed who had not viewed the fight, which I easily won, called me in and told me to choose between teaching and fighting. So he was a boxer, and they made him pick whether or not he wanted to box or if he wanted to be a teacher. My crime was that I had strayed from the conventional expectations of the Black Anglo-Saxon college. Negro colleges are hotbeds of Black Anglo-Saxons and Black Anglo-Saxonism, though not all individuals there are Black Anglo-Saxons and not all Black Anglo-Saxons go to college. Black Anglo-Saxon mimics at such institutions conform so well to white ideals that they frequently receive grants for programs to help Black students lose their in-group dialects. By the time these subjects reach their junior or senior year, it's hard to understand them anymore. Once I had to ask a young co-ed to repeat the word lower 4 times before she injected further explanation to make me realize she was saying law. On another occasion, a fellow student went home to Mississippi for Christmas and fell into association with some of his old cronies. One afternoon, they walked down to the corner store where a jar of pickled pig feet customarily stood on the counter. In the old days, the young man would ask, "Give me some of them feet." But now, a Howard student, he said ultra politely, "Please, may I have some of those fibula tibulas?" The fellows thought he had turned funny on them. In social hygiene classes and modeling symposia, the thin lips and relatively flat hips of white women are held out to Black co-eds as models of emulation. The sensuality of full hips and full lips become, in a turnabout way, degrading. Many are impelled to starve themselves puny in the effort to lose the only positive attribute they may possess, while coveting contrarily the flat hips and horse-like legs of white women. Most Black women still fry their hair in pathetic mimicry of the stringy texture of white women tresses. When anybody knows who has ever chanced to see that there is nothing so beautiful as a colored woman's freshly washed hair. While many whites bake themselves all day in the summer sun to darken their pallid hue, Black Anglo-Saxon mimics disdain the sun and hug the shade in search of a whiteness they long for but will never have. They also use bleaching creams. Some continue to fly to Nassau, to Hawaii, and Caracas, Venezuela, where they may write back to admit they have acquired a sun black, while other exiles, too broke to fly, stay home and boast of having come down from Hong Kong flu. Still others comb the pages of history in search of sham Black heroes among their white idols. A Howard University dean and professor of classics spent years of leave of absence trekking through Greece and Rome collecting slides to prove that there were colored persons in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. He returned to the campus and basked serene in that toothy satisfaction until I was impelled to say, so what? Now they're going to blame us colored for the fall of Rome. In what was probably a cross between exile and possessor symptoms, an army colonel and his wife recently carted their two blonde, what else, Persian cats on an intercontinental excursion. Officials of Caraco would not allow the cats to land because the veterinarian was not due until the next day. So the exiled possessors took the cats to Trinidad, where they were able to land but had to remain quarantined for more than a day. One acquaintance reports, off to Suriname they went, cats not allowed. So off to Grenada they go by boat, where Caesar and Mark Antony, the two cats, spent the night in a hotel suite. The next day, they were off to Venezuela, where more problems ensued, and it took several islands and several days later for the Julians to reach Caraco for the remainder of the trip, all because they wanted to make sure that they had their pet cats with them. Persons engaging in such curious antics are still regarded as cultured. In conversations at house parties, they may lend prestige to their espousals, such as prefatory stamps of approval, as like Shakespeare said, knowing that few of their associates will be able to refute their authority. The same ingenuity is employed in discussions of Black history by cultured Nouveau Blacks who specify dates and manufacture details centuries past to make other Black Anglo-Saxons back down. Black Anglo-Saxon physicians at house parties are invariably careful to make known their professions. For instance, should somebody complain of a simple headache, the cultured physician is likely to say, oh, you have a spasm in the occipitofrontals. Other Black Anglo-Saxon professionals, such as lawyers, will speak profusely of instructing their secretaries to do this or that, while Black Anglo-Saxon school teachers on public vehicles or on street corners waiting for carpools conspicuously display their school records and classroom apparatus. Black Anglo-Saxons of non-professional rank have been known to wear dress clothes and carry briefcases on the way to work as symbols of the professional status they do not have. Black Anglo-Saxons who have nothing to say in conversation are careful to ask knowing questions now and again as a means of feigning entrance into a high-level conversation. Once in a discussion on Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which musically conversant persons present referred to as the Fifth, a haughty black Anglo-Saxon gentleman mistakenly thought they were talking about a bottle of whiskey. However, Nouveau blacks now maintain that Beethoven, among other esteemed whites, was black. Souling is acceptable now to Nouveau blacks as well as pure black Anglo-Saxons. And alas, we also now have the Afro-American cotillion. One such recent event was produced by a Catholic group in the grand ballroom of a downtown Chicago hotel, while the young Black Christians of a Baptist church, whose theme, Something Different, for their annual winter cotillion at the new Colonial House. The prevalence of the youthful members of the Nouveau Blacks was apparent in the observations reported by a Chicago Defender columnist. And the article reads, "The Sun Debs, gowned in shades of yellow, performed a series of figures and also formed an honor guard for the Monsignor in their flowing crimson robes. The background of green was a perfect setting. Cacti, ferns, and tall palm trees seemed to sway in the breeze as the Debs in beautiful white formals and carrying bouquets of tropical flowers were presented by their fathers. The Debs were a picture of loveliness as they bowed to Monsignor Howard, who gave them a papal blessing. Monsignor Vitha presented each Deb with a blessed rosary. After the presentation, the Debs led the group in singing the Negro national anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. The Debs and their fathers then danced the traditional waltz, after which they were transferred to their handsome escorts. The young people then danced a minuet and more contemporary dance figures. These rituals fade into the boundaries of cosmopolitanism, which is still alive today and may be encountered in the most unlikely places. Practically all of the 2,000 citizens of the all-Negro town of Foley, Oklahoma stood for an hour in freezing weather awaiting a white senator's arrival at a groundbreaking ceremony for the erection of a factory. Meanwhile, the Negro mayor of the all-Negro town appointed Lorne Green, white-headed daddy of the Cartwright boys in the television show Bonanza, honorary mayor of the town. While Nouveau blacks are not uncommonly found sprouting ultranationalism by the clock, they are capable of ducking behind closed doors the very next moment with the guilt-ridden white woman liberal. I have seen them consciously cultivating a white female's sense of guilt and sympathy over the Black predicament in hope of future sexual compensation. About 2 months ago, I was slightly startled to see the most flaming Black nationalist on a Black artist panel, later strolling down the aisle with his white girlfriend swinging merrily from his wing. They were grinning and virtually skipping in interracial bliss. He still had on his shepherd-like frock, exposing a goodly portion of his bare Black back. So this is what we talk about when we say that Black nationalists get them a white partner and it's wrong for them to do, but they're doing that in an attempt to demonstrate their dominance over white people. One night during the discussion period of a nationally famous Black nationalist leader's lecture, in which he had voluntarily harangued for a long moment against brothers who chase after the white woman, a young Black sister stood and offered him a challenge. "What about you, Professor?" she cried. The ultra Black white woman Phoebe sputtered and smuttered and stuttered and finally managed to shrug. "Can I help it because they like me?" There is still some controversy as to whether the Nouveau Blacks chase white women or white women chase Nouveau Blacks, or both. Many of the most eminent Black nationalists, including Senghor, president of the Senegal and theoretician of negritude, are married to white women. And I have noted that many of the most fiery white women phobes are victims of broken marriages or unhappy love affairs with white women. However, they chastise me for invoking Freud, or for he was a white scholar and it is more fashionable in their view to refer to Black authority. When I attended a party of Nouveau Blacks a few months ago, I was struck by the fact that a psychiatrist collaborator on a current bestseller compulsively proclaimed, "I love all the brothers." After several cocktails, he switched to, "I love all the niggers." He intermittently inserted bitter criticism of me for having been moderately critical in a book review for the San Francisco Chronicle Examiner Sunday supplement of one of his Nouveau Black comrades. I asked him point blank why, if he loves all the niggers, he neglected to have one of them write the introduction to his book, but instead solicited the services of a white Southern senator. He had no answer and finally walked away to join some other dashiki guests who, having consumed a hearty soul dinner, were trying to do the African bugaboo while exclaiming now and again, "I'm Black and I'm proud." So they have a likeness of Black power and Black nationalism, but it's not in their hearts. Soul food, of which Black Anglo-Saxons previously were ashamed, now is a safe badge of superficial militancy. High-class couples now may freely throw mammoth soul food dinners. One such was recently held in the massive 10-room house of a Chicago physician and his nouveau Black spouse. It was spread over 12 round tables, seating 10 persons each, reported the woman's editor of the local weekly. The menu consisted of a whole roast pig, complete with the traditional apple in its mouth, chitlins, pig feet, black-eyed peas, cooked with pig ears, baked ham, roast beef, tenderloin roast, barbecued turkey, mustard and turnip greens, candied yams, candied sweet potatoes, 3 salads, potato, bean, and gelatin, a relish tray, crackling cornbread, corn muffins, and hot rolls. Dessert no less completed the meal, eggnog and a choice of coconut, pound, or chocolate cake. Uniformed guards escorted guests from their cars to the house and kept watch over the many mink, sable, cashmere, vicuna coats of the guests. The food, of course, was catered as befits a sociable possessor. A uniformed waiter stood at the table serving coffee and or champagne. Besides the 120 individuals at the 12 tables, an additional 30 or more sat at a long bar, manned by 3 bartenders, and down in the living room section of the basement. After the dinner, predictably, the tables were removed for dancing, which lasted until early morning. Check out the sociables and possessors in the women's pages of the Negro weeklies. If you can't do so firsthand, there, of a given week, you will note, say that so and so slipped out to Spain and sent greetings, or that such and such a lady possessor went on a buying spree for this or that company with unlimited time. Never mind that none of it belonged to her. She couldn't find the Prussies she wanted, but she bought the Gucci bags and shoes she hoped for. Oh my, such problems. Her breed is the last of the pure black Anglo-Saxons now mutating into Nouveau blacks because of conformity to the current fashion of blackness. Of all the varieties of pure black Anglo-Saxons, perhaps the most prevalent, because of their profound desire for social acceptance, are the sociables, where females typically dominate. Collectivities of females within the sociable club are typically called femmes. The passion for French nom de plumes is quite severe, although it is now possible to come across a neo-natural-headed black nationalist, though he has never set foot outside the South, snarls and twangs the word bloody like a native Englishman. However, even a British accent does not compare with a knowledge of a French word to drop here and there. When Senghor, the president of Senegal and the father of the concept negritude, came to Howard University, he presented his long lecture entirely in French, for he knew too little English. 1,500 Negroes jammed the auditorium and sat in stony silence for almost an hour, pretending that they understood his every word. Time and time again, the Dean of Liberal Arts, sitting on the stage as a platform guest, would burst into applause to indicate his appreciation of Senghor's remarks. I personally have no idea whether his applause was appropriate. However, when the dean's applause came while Senghor was standing at the rostrum with his back to the administrator, was groping ever so briefly for the proper phrase, he glanced around fleetingly around at the dean, looking slightly puzzled. Femmes may range all the way from the LeBarons to the Wheelers, the Foxes, and the Town and Country Club. There are also the Dukes, the Green Donkeys, the Vivants, the Gallivanters, the Bachelors, and the Royal Knights among men, and the Benedicts, the thrifty ladies who don't go in much for thrift, and the cosmopolitan ladies. There are a variety of millionaire clubs in which most of the members have at least a bank account and a mortgaged home, and of course, the original thrifty ladies and the original Town and Country Club. These are characteristics of groups struck by the numerous coups d'etats in Black Anglo-Saxon femme circles. This is only a sample of the groups now throwing such annual affairs as premiere parties, dinner, cocktails, and of course dancing, which have dinner, cocktails, and of course dancing at plush downtown hotel suites. A recent club outing was described by a leading society columnist as one of the gayest gatherings in the club circuit. A handsome gaggle of girls and their best halves, as usual, enjoy cards, meetings, yakking beautifully, and at the tail end of the evening, after the lush midnight supper, got the dancing urge. Male school teacher socialites continue to sponsor gala send-off parties for themselves prior to Eastern tours, usually by car, to 2 or 3 major cities across the country. A group called the Chicago Hawaiians were able to boast as late as New Year's Eve of 1969 of chalking up a social club first, in this case, the first Negro social club to entertain at the Colonial House. Because remember, they want to be the first and only Black people there. At the plethora of champagne sips and installation balls, even modern grandmoms go high fashion. There is also a hardcore species of nouveau blacks who reject much of the more debonair phenomenon described thus far. They are, however, no less Black Anglo-Saxon in basic orientation, though they may conform to a now acceptable style of Black nationalism. Some are cynical opportunists exploiting the Black movement for high-level Black appointments or lucrative poverty program slots. This contention has been known to end in in-group shootouts. Many began by flirting with the Black Power concept in its purest form, only to retreat into a green power connotation of the term, defining Black power as green power, the maroon of the textbook, the gray of the pay envelope, and the green of the dollar bill. They emerge as auctioneers of Blackness, superficial facades of Blackness, sprouting revolution while unscrupulously pimping off the poverty program and Afro cosmetics. They seek social acceptance through the natural hairdo, all natural to them, switching back and forth in the case of women to the traditional process. Many female nouveau blacks wear their natural hair but contradict themselves with heavily applied light blue eyeshadow and false brunette eyelashes. Still others flip back and forth between the natural and a processed wig. More recently, of course, with the emergence of the natural wig, they are able to retain their processed hairstyles and yet go slumming or souling in a natural at Afro-American affairs. Many nouveau blacks unconsciously overplay the process or state of being Black and its symbols in order to avoid doing Black. They lose themselves in dogmatic nihilism and mystic militancy. Their militancy, their Blackness, becomes a religion, so to speak, in which strategy is enslaved by their symbolism. Africa, for example, a land most never truly expect to visit, may take the place of the Christian's heaven, as it were. African garb may replace the priestly frock. This is not to deride such practices as a means of cementing one's identity as a Black individual, so long as they do not become end goals instead of means. Astrology is increasingly taking the place of religion in these circles, while in some cases marijuana provides the subliminal mysticism. Frantz Fanon, Mao Tse-tung, and Che Guevara may be parroted like a Bible, without apparent concern for transforming their conclusions to fit the demography, culture, and social organization of this country. Sometimes I feel that the white folk gave us such works for some good reason, yet These are the same nationalists who measure militancy on a scale of white rejection. Those who reject whites 100%, though moderate to conservative economically, politically, and otherwise, are regarded as more militant than those who reject only 90%, and so on. Stokely Carmichael has spoken of the Nouveau Blacks as people who are so proud of their newfound Blackness, they constantly seek to step on the toes of persons whom they consider Negroes. This leads to the blacker than thou cults and the black upmanship games typically played at black conferences where persons wrap themselves in African robes, aboys, dashikis, and bubas, and try to outshine one another's militancy by way of firing, rapping, or blowing before spitting, before splitting or sneaking off to the nearest pad or bar for a date with a sister. Invariably, at a black conference of any kind, some fellow eventually stands up and tops all around by declaring the whole affair a waste of time. In many cases, this is the unfortunate truth, inasmuch as the participants have mainly been engaged in psychological release and guilt rendering entertainment for whites, such as making fun of the white man, calling him a pig, threatening to wipe him out, and the like. They are oral revolutionists addicted to handicapping, hand clapping, revival meeting style of foot stomping black militancy. So, not really a form of black militancy. Again, they're showing all the signs, but they're not really doing the work. They're just making off symbolic gestures. This could explain in part the extreme popularity of black conferences typically billed as national whenever they cover more than a single state, and multiplicity of other talkathons. As a matter of fact, Nouveau Blacks would rather talk about the idea of promoting Blackness than to act to make anything Black. They would rather talk Black than be Black. Even when they do engage in some revolutionary act, they are too often crippled by the expectation of instant revolution. And when the rest and when they get going and when the going gets rough, they cop out and return to the customary dancing of the funky Broadway and the possum trot. Some use dark sunshades, bushy hairstyles, and African costumes to cloak their timid hearts. It is not unusual to have an old friend walk up unrecognizable in his African get-up and beard and declare that he is now ready to get down with the white man. After you discover that Muhammad Akbar Karim Ali is none other than old Willie V. Jackson from Money, Mississippi, he invariably follows you home to sit up all night drinking your whiskey and eating your chitlins, unless he is so militant as to have rejected pork leftovers and related Southern Negro staples. Intermittently, he will spell out the parlor strategy of a fiery declaration of war on the honky pigs until 4 o'clock in the morning, or at least until the whiskey is gone. Should you later solicit his aid in some revolutionary skirmish, he is likely to express his revolutionary regrets that he has to help his wife shop for groceries or some other similar tale. It is then fortunate that we are able to say that Black Anglo-Saxons generally do that what Black Anglo-Saxons generally do has little or no direct effect on the general behavior of the oppressed Black masses. The worst consequence of their sad quirks derives from their default in setting the proper example. But here is where the Nouveau Black variety does play an accurate and an acute empathetic part. However, the very emergence of the Nouveau Black strain is a kind of testimony to the now impending demise of the entire Black Anglo-Saxon breed. A few we will, of course, unfortunately have with us forever, but they will in time, like the buffalo and the antelope, comprise mainly a source of curiosity. Perhaps the last of the great Black Anglo-Saxons, the Nouveau Blacks, provide through their antics clear and painful evidence that, like all oppressed peoples everywhere, they also want to be free, so long as they do not cease searching for a more substantial footing. They may someday succeed in finding their proper direction and identity and a lasting place in the history of the Black race of the world. And that is the end of the Black Anglo-Saxons book. As you can see, there were many different aspects to the personality of the Black Anglo-Saxon, but at the end of the day, they all want white acceptance. Even the nouveau Black Anglo-Saxons want white acceptance. They want to be with a white woman. They want to be with a white partner. They want to have white people at their events. They want to host white people in their activities. They want the Pope or the Archbishop to be there to officiate their wedding. They still look to white people for acceptance because they themselves have not accepted the fact that they are Black. All right, guys. I want to thank the forecast, Sister Ra, and the elders that came with her, and Anthony McPhail. I want to thank Brother Bakari who's listening. I want to thank the people that Brother Bakari sends over here who listen. I want to thank the ladies at the Daycare Ladies Network and the staff at Jesse's Kids, as well as the staff at the Anthony Adrian Academy. I know Dorico Cooper is listening, Tinkerbell 87 is listening, Bawana Haguziki is listening, and so many others. I appreciate each and every one of you. I will see you Monday, June. Nope, July. I'm going to take a week off while I look for a book, so make sure you check out the poll. I think we're going to be reading Yurugu next, but I thank each and every one of you for your time and for listening. Peace, guys.